Welcome to the RCR Wireless News webinar on implications and applications of real-time and fast big data. I'm Kelly Hill, technology reporter for RCR Wireless News, and I'd like to first start off by introducing our participants today. I'll be your moderator for this program, and we're joined today by Chantal Carey, analyst in the telecom operators practice at Ovum. We also have Scott Burns, Director of Lifecycle Management for CenturyLink. He works on some of their big data programs. Marina Marino, who is also with CenturyLink, Director of Product Delivery and Customer Experience. We also have Ansi Tarani, Director of Business Development and Analytics at Expo, as well as Ben Parker, VP of Strategy and New Markets for Guavas, and Scott Sumner, VP of Solutions Development and Marketing for Exedian Networks. So thank you all for participating, and we hope to get some great insights from them today. So just a few things this week that have been in the news as far as big data. Accenture is launching a new big data connected analytics offering that emphasizes user friendliness and really trying to extend the reach of big data beyond data scientists and specialists within the business. We had Apple buying MapSense, which is a big data company that analyzes location and mapping info from smartphones and connected cars and other internet-enabled devices. Apple's really been beefing up their abilities in big data analytics over the last few years, including a purchase of a social media big data company called Topsy back in 2013. We have Microsoft Research working on an open source distributed analytics platform for cloud services that leverage big data analytics. Also some interesting research going on in that area. And then this gets into a little bit in how we're seeing big data applied in certain verticals such as healthcare. The National Institutes of Health released its precision medicine framework for integrating big data into real-world clinical applications. Part of what I think is interesting about this particular announcement is that they are emphasizing this framework and a common data model across all of the databases that are involved, including keeping an open mind as far as biometric sensors and IoT, which in some cases for medical applications are really still in their infancy as far as standardization and what the data coming out of those applications is going to look like. But they definitely are keeping an open mind and and wanting to have a flexible framework that allows that kind of data to be leveraged, including data from wireless devices. Today available on rcrwireless.com is our real-time data special report. A few of the key takeaways from this report. Big data use cases often but not always require real-time intelligence. I think we'll get into some of that with our panel discussion today. There are certain use cases that really demand it, and others that real-time is not necessarily the way to go. Analytics overall, though, are becoming more central to telecom companies' core business of providing functional networks, caring for their customers, and generating revenue. Complexity is really part of what's driving the move toward big data and automation. The complexity of networks, the explosion of Internet of Things devices and applications, and the advent of 5G. And all of those things are going to make analytics-based automation crucial for operator success, both in terms of maintaining their own business as well as expanding potential revenue sources. And so that report is going to be available today for download on rcrwireless.com, and we'll hear more about that topic today with our webinar participants. And with that, I would like to move on to Chantal Carey, who's going to talk to us about some of the overarching market trends going on right now in big data analytics.
So within big data analytics trends, specifically for telcos, and Kelly, you can feel free to go forward a couple of slides. Yep, to that slide. So we're seeing there are several things really driving the need for telco, need for big data analytics. And a lot of these are driven by churn, subscriber acquisition costs, ARPU, as well as competition in the market, not only from OTT players, but also from non-traditional telco providers such as TV players, also the CapEx and OpEx costs, and then, of course, customer expectations and the changing demands. Next slide, please. So just to elaborate a bit more, we're seeing that churn rates for telcos are steadily climbing. So in some regions, such as North America and in different regions within Europe, we're finding that churn rates are hovering around 2%, which is not too bad. But in other markets, specifically in a lot of the emerging markets and areas with high prepaid customer base, we're seeing churn rates at 6% and upwards. So it's something that's quite alarming. We're also noticing some very interesting trends among different age groups. So recently at OVM, we did a consumer insight survey, and one of the questions we asked to consumers were, within the next 12 months, do they have plans to change service providers? And what we found was 31% of millennials, so anyone under the age of 34, said that they were likely to change service providers within the next 12 months. And that's kind of a big comparison to 18% of consumers 35 and up. So when you kind of add in those factors along with the high subscriber acquisition costs, again, in postpaid markets, due to contracts, lease devicing, and then competition in the market, subscriber acquisition cost is high. When you couple those things in with declining profits, declining ARPU, telcos really have an opportunity here to really invest in big data analytics to turn these things around. Next slide, please. So on this page, you can kind of see two different cycles. So on the left side here is where we see the market, or the telecoms market currently. So currently, most telcos are trapped in this negative cycle. So there are high subscriber acquisition costs, low ARPU, high churn, decreasing profits and revenues, and minimal innovation. What big data analytics will allow telcos to do is make this into a positive cycle. So by applying big data analytics strategically, telcos can go after some of these crucial KPIs and then turn this negative cycle into one that's positive, where telcos have a higher ARPU and customer lifetime value, which leads to loyalty and retention among customers. Customers that can offer that are subscribing to a variety of services. So not only spending a lot of money on their monthly data packages, but also have a family share package, are connecting tablets and other devices, and are utilizing other telco services, have a higher ARPU, and it's going to be much more difficult for them to churn, and much more likely for them to become not only a loyal customer, but also become a brand promoter. And once you have these loyal customers and brand promoters, that's when you start to see enhanced revenues, enhanced profits, and then with those leftover profits, telcos can invest that into innovation, developing new services, which then all kind of go back into lowering the subscriber acquisition costs and subscriber retention costs. Next slide, please. So the use cases for big data analytics for telcos they're limitless. So right now what we're seeing in the industry are telcos are looking to undergo digital transformation, looking to be ready to compete in the digital age and offer digital services. The digital transformation stage for telcos is something that's, one, going to be very time consuming. We're talking about years of transformation. And two, it's something that's going to be very costly. And in the meantime, telcos can't afford to kind of sit on their hands and wait 3, 5, 10 years from now in order to start seeing changes in some of these big metrics. So what big data analytics will allow telcos to do is to monetize some of their existing assets and give them real-time results immediately. So some of the use cases that big data analytics can be applied to across the business are in network, so network planning and monetization of the network, improving customer experience, churn prediction and management, upselling, and many other use cases. Next slide, please. So this chart here is based off of a survey that we conducted. So we pulled telcos who have already invested in analytic solutions, and we asked them within the departments internally who's utilizing these analytics tools. And overwhelmingly, we found that marketing departments and customer care departments are utilizing the analytics tools, but certainly there are business cases for the strategy, networks, product service development, and finance teams to also use analytics solutions. Next slide, please. This graph here just kind of shows some of the current use cases that telcos are supporting with their analytics solution. So again, customer experience, network monitoring, churn management, service management, these are some of the top use cases that telcos are currently using to their analytics solutions to support. Next slide. And then this chart shows the data sources. So we asked telcos, where are they getting their data from when they're using these analytics platforms? And overwhelmingly, CRM data and billing data were the top data sources for telcos, but also network data, service usage data is important, as well as device data, so understanding what's happening on the customer's actual device. Something I did want to point out here is unstructured data such as social media and email. While there is a lot of interest there, it's still not something that telcos are utilizing a lot, and that's because of the unstructured nature of it. And it also requires a lot of customer participation in helping to collect that data. Next slide, please. So this slide just kind of touches on some of the unique applications that I've seen in the market so far with analytics solutions. So strategic partnerships, I think, is one of the most interesting things that I've seen here. So partnering with OTT players and other third-party companies to offer a solution to customers. And I think a great local example in the United States is T-Mobile and what they've done with their Music Freedom program. So as a part of their Un-carrier strategy, if you're a customer that's signed up to the Music Freedom program, anytime you're using any music streaming services, the data that you use as a part of the Music Freedom program doesn't count for your overall monthly data usage. Some other unique examples of that are or of analytics in the market include device analytics. So again, understanding what's happening on the customer's device, and then kind of using that as a way to set policy control to control not only optimize network, but also control the quality of service. And then finally, customer interaction analytics is also kind of gaining some traction in the market. And customer interaction analytics essentially analyzes speech, text, and IVR data in real time and allows the telco to identify certain words or phrases consistent with a dissatisfied customer. And this is something that can be particularly useful for telcos that operate in contact centers in maybe an offshore location where maybe agents don't speak the native language of their customers. Also, customer interaction analytics can be used to help do upselling in real time for agents. Next slide. And then finally, just to kind of go over some trends that we think will be occurring in the market in the near future with big data analytics is the idea of predictive analytics. So right now, the industry is very much in getting to a point where we can react in real time, but certainly we'll get to a point where reacting in real time will be too late. So the whole idea of predictive analytics is for telcos to be able to predict patterns, behaviors, and outcomes and resolve issues before they occur. So if a telco is looking to roll out a new service, looking to make changes to the network, using predictive analytics to predict the different outcomes so that they can fix these issues before they even happen or before they even roll out services to customers. And then certainly with the Internet of Things beginning to take off, it will certainly generate a lot of data over the coming years, which telcos could then leverage to get a better view of their customers. So when you think about the Internet of Things and wearable devices and connected cars and connected homes, telcos will really be able to collect a lot of data about customer preferences and habits that they can then use to develop new services and personalize existing services. Kelly?
Okay. Wonderful. Thank you, Chantal. I was interested that you mentioned the the use of analytics as far as keywords and whatnot in customer interactions. There were some folks that I talked to that mentioned even the use of systems that can analyze the tone of someone's voice and how upset they are and those kind of subtle issues. Maybe that's not something that's necessarily in wide use right now, but it's definitely potential there as far as analyzing those customer interactions. So interesting stuff. So right now we are going to be moving on to our presenters from CenturyLink, Maria and Scott.
All right, Thank you. So a couple things I wanted to point out just initially is my role is really owning not only the data infrastructure, but also the BI infrastructure that follows that. So what's interesting to us is a lot of things that were just talked about in the previous presentation are all real in our everyday lives relative to how do we look at data, what kind of data are we looking at. And what you'll see from a trend perspective is everybody's starting to move from a little bit less of a transactional nature to more of a behavioral nature to be able to get to more of that real-time analytics platform that will allow us to actually get a little bit less descriptive and diagnostic, so what happened and why did it happen, and move a little bit more to the predictive and prescriptive. At CenturyLink, we've taken a very concerted approach to actually move from or move more towards a customer experience model and really journey mapping out what that customer experience looks like so that we're putting it in the customer's terms as opposed to traditionally we've had more of an inside view so that we're focused externally rather than internally about how people interact, what those interaction points are, and effectively from an information management infrastructure that allowed us to actually create a series of data domains that actually track along with the customer's journey as to how do we think about putting data together, and then how do we analyze that data in each one of these individual domains. So the slide that you see right now is all around when you think about big data analytics and the transformation to go from that more transactional to behavioral. We're really looking at strategic impact areas that will drive action in the organization as it relates to a customer. So being able to capture that data and translate it back to that customer experience is really critical to us to be able to facilitate a more data-driven organization where we can push a lot more of that data to the front line so that they are better informed when they interact with customers, and we can actually try to do some things like churn mitigation, or more effectively do things like churn mitigation, like understanding what the pain points are in that overall customer experience, understand what's going on from a product perspective. So I'm going to walk through a couple of these data domains here pretty quickly so you get a sense of some of the things that we're looking at. And we'll go left to right because really from a customer experience and a customer journey standpoint, this is how the interaction model and the behavioral model starts to actually formulate itself. So on the left-hand side, you really start with the marketing side of it. So we've actually developed a very specific methodology and KPI set around marketing data. So it starts with how do I actually go capture the opportunity around market sizing, and then what programs, tactics, and campaigns am I actually putting in place to capture that market opportunity. So being able to measure that performance, and then ultimately be able to understand, okay, what kind of funnel are we generating on the B2B side, what kind of transactional scenario as well as coverage are we creating on more of the B2C side, and really make sure that we understand what our overall data universe is, our contact health, and our ability to actually interact with the masses as well as at an individual level relative to what their experience looks like, and that could be new logo or existing customer. So you start to look at how do you attribute revenue to those actual tactics. What does a lead gen walk look like? How do you get to predictive modeling around who's going to actually buy? That can be anywhere from clone modeling to bootstrap modeling to, in some cases, we've even taken a financial approach to doing ARIMA modeling so that we can look at seasonality impacts to say what impact is that going to have on our revenue stream and what do the buying cycles actually look like. And then ultimately, this is where you really start to get to your first view of behavioral activity in terms of digital interactions. Now, this is not a lot of companies do this really well. I would say we're still in our infancy stages of being able to do this, but this is where it's all moving, where you need to be able to map a complete customer's journey based off of what is it that they're actually trying to solve, and then understand what the learning cycle is, what the buying behavior is, what the signals are, to be able to interact with those people and bring them down the funnel quicker. Then you go to pricing. So when you think about what's the next thing a person does once they identify that they need a service to be able to solve an issue that they have, you start looking at, okay, are we priced competitively, and are we effectively able to actually deliver against the value proposition at a price that the market will actually accept. From there you go to sales. What's your sales effectiveness, performance measurement across the overall sales hierarchy? What are our transformational metrics to be able to sell more strategic products versus what is traditionally legacy products? And then what's the overall, how are we doing against plan, and how do we forecast out where we need to be to meet our financial objectives? And then from there, we start to get into service delivery. So going from the middle to the end, it's the provisioning pipeline. How do you look at standardized cycle times for, are you meeting customer committed due dates? Are you actually able to realize revenue quicker for certain products other than others? Because obviously that's what all flows down to the bottom line. And then really being able to understand from a sales to billing standpoint, are you actually, how much breakage do you have? Are you seeing churn before you actually get it installed? What are the pain points that are actually driving that? Effectively, that gives you a much better visibility to interactions with products, your ability to actually do the service delivery. From there, you start to get to usage and revenue patterns and care and support patterns. So how are people actually interacting with you once they have your service? So how does that actually align back to your general ledger and what you're doing from an actual financial performance management standpoint? How is your network utilization being deployed? Do you have growers and shrinkers that are actually, from a large business perspective, actually driving your overall revenue stream? Are you diversifying what your revenue stream looks like? How are you utilizing the network? Are you getting the best capacity off of your network, and are you leveraging what's already in the ground from a traditional telco standpoint versus having to build new for every single new logo that you're putting in? And then ultimately, what are you doing from a strategic versus legacy? How much do you have on your long-haul network, your short-haul network, your local Ethernet network, et cetera? And then ultimately, are you providing a service from a care and support standpoint that actually allows them to get the service at the SLA that they've requested? So that's great. That's all very operational. It starts with the market sizing and then moves to more of the operational and then understands how your service delivery platform is actually performing. But on top of that, perception is reality when you talk to customers. So NPS, or Net Promoter Score, is actually a really critical part in understanding, are we actually meeting the needs of customers? So we do both transactional surveys as well as have a global NPS index that ultimately allows us to line all of these pieces up, and we formulate the questions within that so that we can understand not only how are we doing operationally, but how do our customers feel that we're doing relative to our ability to service their needs and solve their problems. Again, this isn't about providing a product. This is about providing a solution to a problem that a customer has. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So the next piece of this is, okay, great. You've compiled this entire big data analytics platform. You figured out what your data domains are. You've structured the data, or you've been able to incorporate both unstructured as well as structured data into a way that you can consume it. Now, how do you serve it up so that you can actually use it and you drive action in the organization? So when we talk about the future of business intelligence here, we're really trying to span an analytical continuum that starts with business process at the lowest end and goes to strategy and what our overall KPIs are for the business at the higher end. So from a step standpoint, when we approach this, we started with consolidating to a uniform data structure for BI. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean you can't pull unstructured data in, but you kind of have to know exactly what you want to do with that data within those data domains to be able to actually consume it and take action from it. So data is knowledge, but if you can't do anything with it, you're not actually changing an outcome. And knowledge is only, if you can't actually use knowledge to create wisdom and change in your organization, then you're actually not going to, be moving forward, and you're not going to be evolving with your overall customer base. Next, we needed to align all of our analyst resources. So for those of you who know telco pretty well, typically telco tends to be a very siloed environment in terms of, this group manages this operational piece, this group manages the revenue component, this group manages this. The idea is you need to have an end-to-end view of how it actually impacts the customer, and then you have to be able to serve that information up. So on the lower left-hand side of this particular chart, it's a very standard Gartner business intelligence maturity model, but effectively what you're trying to do is move your organization from what's at the lower end, from unaware, all the way up to more of the focused, strategic, and pervasive level, where again, that's when you start getting into not just the descriptive and diagnostic of what happened and why did it happen, but more of the predictive and prescriptive around what's going to happen and how do I actually change what's going to happen. So in our environment, we've built a series of apps through in-memory BI applications that effectively allow you to say, okay, I'm looking at all those data domains and I'm looking at the overall analytic continuum around process all the way up to strategy, and I'm building applications that allow drillable features that are proliferated across our entire organization, so people at the front line get the information that they need to be able to make an impact at a customer level, but at the top, all that data rolls up and it consistently rolls up, so where our executive team at the top actually understands, okay, this is how these changes are actually impacting our overall ability to deliver both top line as well as bottom line revenue from a financial statement standpoint. What are the risks in being able to do this? Really, you really have to define what the overall platform are, and you have to make sure that you actually have, whether it be OpEx or CapEx, to be able to fund not only the server infrastructure, the resource, or the software licensing, but also the resource development resources that will allow you to be able to develop all of this in-house, or at least be able to maintain it in-house. An outsourced model is good, but typically what happens is whenever you go through periods of change within a business, that can be affected pretty significantly in your ability to actually maintain that infrastructure. So my direction and my advice to our internal organization is try to build as much internal capability as you possibly can with outsourced expertise to overlay over the top of it. For example, data science resources are often typically very, very hard to find in the marketplace, and a lot of times in a traditional big company environment, you can't necessarily afford and can't keep that talent. So those may be resources that you end up outsourcing, whereas the actual physical data information management infrastructure that drives all of this, that funnels in all of that predictive capability would probably be maintained internally. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Maria Marino, who's my counterpart. She's actually a consumer of a lot of the data and the infrastructure, as well as the tool sets and platforms that we put together, as to how that impacts her view of managing customer experience.
Okay,
Thanks,
Maria.
Scott. Yeah, thank you. I thought I'd walk you through a couple use cases. So I couldn't do my job as being responsible for business product customer experience without the data that Scott has built and displays and makes it very easy for me and my team to consume. And I couldn't take any kind of thoughtful actions to improve the customer experience and make sure I'm fixing the right things and investing dollars in the right places without it. The dashboarding that Scott has created, I think it's very important for everyone to understand how customer-centric it is. It's not a inside-out view, as Scott described. It's how the entirety of the life cycle impacts how customers feel about CenturyLink. And I get that from my NPS data, which stands for Net Promoter Score. I'm sure most of you are familiar with that methodology and that measurement system. So I understand from that how customers feel, but I get the why from the data that is triangulated in a very friendly way for me to take action. So I'll walk you through three quick examples of what I've done over the past year with this kind of data. For our hosted VoIP product, we were seeing an uptick in billing credits, and I was seeing in the NPS scores lower levels of satisfaction than I would have liked. And when I begin to peel back the onion, you might just think, oh, customers don't like the product, it's not working well. Well, in fact, what was happening was that we would install the phones and the circuits and consider it done, but VoIP is such a feature-rich service offering that customers still wanted to keep tweaking, say, their music on hold or their hunt groups to really conform to their unique business environment. And really, customers just needed another couple days of hand-holding and advice and consultation from us to tweak the system so that it perfectly fit their environment. And so it's really, you know, the NPS data told me I had a problem. Scott's data on billing credits started triangulating with that, and then I can do the root cause analysis. And rather than fix the product, there was nothing wrong with the product. It was just adding on some more consultation that allowed us to fix this problem. With our managed office product, that's kind of, you can think of it as office in a box for a medium-sized business customer, and they get everything from phone connectivity, unified communications, business applications, and a data connection. And again, NPS was indicating that I had a problem, and the dashboarding Scott provides on this product suite was showing me that I was showing an extraordinarily high number of support tickets being created. And again, you might knee-jerk reaction, oh, that we have a problem with the product. And again, diving deep into the trouble ticket data Scott gives me, I could see, in fact, we weren't actually working on break-fix activity. We were working on supplying advice and information to the customer, and that allowed me to then make an investment in a knowledge base to help solve that. So again, you know, these leading indicators and the dashboarding allows me not to just react quickly. It's not just about speed. It's about spending your company's dollars wisely on the right problems and the right solutions. And finally, I think this last one is pretty interesting. Paperless billing. It's been around for a long time. There's obviously environmental and efficiency and cost benefits. But what Scott's data showed me is it correlates very interestingly to churn. And I wouldn't have been able to see that connection without the dashboarding and the triangulation of various data elements. And so we're investing a lot more in our paperless billing infrastructure as a result, because it's not just cost down for CenturyLink, it's churn avoidance and revenue in the door. So those are just some 3 concrete examples to illuminate how effectively we can use it if the data is presented in the right way.
Okay.
Thank you.
Great, Maria, thank you so much. Maria and Scott, great. And now we're going to be moving on to Expo, and we can go ahead there. Ansi?
Thank you. Yes, thank you. Probably Expo is not that well known in the big data and in the analytics field, so perhaps I take first 1 minute to introduce the company and our mission in analytics. So basically, Expo has been around for 30 years in the industry. Our fields of expertise expand from the core of the network all the way to the edge, no matter whether it's a wireline or wireless industry. Over the past years, the company has been undergoing aggressive transformation. So the background is in the test and measurement business, but over the past years, we've been expanding our offering towards portable platforms, cloud-hosted solutions for process standardization and automation, and also the service assurance and analytics, which basically are built to provide the operator a centralized approach and end-to-end view into their network and service experience. Can you please click the next one? So my job is in the service assurance division. I'm responsible for the business development for the analytics solutions. Basically, our mission is to create the most comprehensive end-to-end view in the service experience. So we do this by using our real-time analytics platform that utilizes heuristic mechanisms and machine learning. Basically, we collect the data from various big data sources, from physical network and all the way to customers. And of course, we complement this with our 30 years of experience in the business. So can you please move on the next one? So the key concept of delivering and implementing the mission is end-to-end service experience. So this is basically the concept. It is a subset of customer experience. We basically focus on measuring the level of experience provided by the network. Basically, we measure, analyze, and report that from 3 different angles, covering the subscribers, the services, and the network perspectives. So what we mean by the end-to-end is actually the whole chain from end-user device to end service and back. And basically, That means also covering not only the device, but also the radio network, the core network, backhaul network, IMS, transmission network, so basically the whole chain. We also want to do this on multiple different layers, so not only look at the user plane or control plane, but we also want to combine the physical network to be part of the analysis. So basically, we do this by using our analytics platform, and then the main data sources that we actually utilize in building this view are active and passive probes. So we can either use Expo's own solutions, or we can use third-party solutions, basically to collect the data from the various networks or different interfaces between the network subsystems. Okay, thank you.
So Scott, if we can move on to you, let's go ahead with our next slide.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I'll keep this fairly short. Just wanted to show that Exedian has been working with hundreds of service providers globally in terms of data analytics, real-time instrumentation, and bringing the network state has a lot of value to an operator at the network and operations, and level of really driving quality of experience for the end user by allowing operators to establish full end-to-end visibility for network and service performance and assuring those, and then gaining control over those in a way that they can use this dynamic real-time information from the network state to provide dynamic control through SDN controllers, policy engines, or simply to optimize their network based on their own operational practices. So really being aware of where bottlenecks exist and where problems can happen allows an operator to take action immediately. And this is ultimately in the goal, of course, of differentiating the operator based on an exceptional quality of experience. When we look at all of what we talked about today in terms of ARPU increasing and trying to get out of the cycle of racing to the bottom with price, this is really ultimately where it begins. It begins with a service that's much better than just best effort. So a number of operators have started to use big analytics in conjunction with this visibility to use the small and fast data analytics that come from network visibility to drive SDN control directly, and use machine learning to correlate that with the big and deep analytics that allow them to understand the context of each customer. And really the result of this is an optimized user experience that's dynamically optimized in real time under all load conditions to make sure that users can come to count on those services and turn to the provider for their connectivity needs without the customer churn. Next slide, please, Kelly. So the difficulty here in SDN and NFV-based networks, and a lot of service providers' multi-vendor networks, is how they can gather this information from across the network. So increasingly there's this concept emerging of the instrumentation layer, which is the ability to see all of the different network layer performance end-to-end and for each individual link and element directly. And then if you can advance that, Kelly, you would have this information directly fed back as a real-time nervous system on a per-second basis back into the control applications that would be managing and monitoring the network. And this allows service providers to get a unified view of network performance and application performance across their existing infrastructure and adapt it as it evolves. Thanks, Kelly.
Okay, great.
So this is Ben Parker from Guavas. And so I'd like to introduce you to Guavas and where we're focused on the application of big data in the telecommunications market and IoT. So we have been focusing on the fusion and analysis of data, both the combination of data that is in motion as well as data that is at rest. So data in motion is data that's streaming off of network elements in the telecom network, such as the PGWs or the radio access networks. Of course, we look at web services, sensor data that can be the various IoT type sensors, whether they're passive or active types of sensors. We can fuse unstructured data into the network, such as social media and various other types of content. When we bring that together with data at rest, it provides context. So for example, a piece of information that may be coming off of a router may not be meaningful until until we're able to fuse that with customer information to say, now we know that this piece of information is applied to this customer or this group of customers, and now we can actually take action on it. So the ability to actually fuse together multiple data sources very quickly, both in real time, non-real-time, and the third thing is completely analyzing the data for using in the future, gives us the ability to actually give you timely and operational decisions via either live dashboards, triggers, or we can give you actions based on anomaly detection machine learning alerts. Next slide, please. So where we are different from a lot of other companies that are doing big data, we can collect data at scale. Our collector infrastructure has been placed in the largest networks that you can find and has satisfied scale. We have a unique ability that's to collect data and then reduce it at the edge. So we can compute first and then move a subset of that data based on specific knowledge about what the application is, move that back to the data center and perform the analytics on it. We can, of course, enrich and infuse the data in real time, and then we spend a lot of time applying data science to that data, meaning we want to take a wide array of data, literally trillions of data points per day in some cases, analyze that, and then drive an action or a decision. And really, at the end of the day, when you look at kind of the continuum of deploying analytics into a network, the first challenge in big networks is, of course, just simply collecting it, because collecting it can be overwhelmingly expensive, both from a transport perspective as well as from a storage perspective. So we really quickly want to get to actions and decisions, basically adding business value as soon as possible. And this is where we come at the problem from an application-specific set of use cases, which I will talk about next in the next slide. So we focus in our mobile product suite, we focus really on two major categories: next generation service assurance, as well as the next generation customer experience management. In the service assurance areas, network operations is a major category. Inside of this, we have, whoops, previous slide, there you go. We focus on network and service performance monitoring, give you continuous understanding of the network on an end-to-end basis, literally from the radio access network all the way up to the core networks, inclusive of all the transport networks and subset elements in between. We're looking at anomaly detection and root cause analysis to understand what systems are causing problems, what customers are affected by those problems, and then what action should be taken, whether that be alerting customer assurance so that they don't dispatch trucks in a for example, a fixed line scenario, or letting operations know quickly and what the most likely cause is to focus them on solving the problem, improving the mean time to understanding, and then ultimately reducing the mean time to repair. Of course, the impact and cost analysis of this is we want to understand both what is the impact of outages as well as the impact to changes in the network. And so in many cases in large networks, maintenance events are the cause of outages. So simply making a change to the network, what happened? Was that the root cause, and how do you mitigate that in the future? Now, what is very interesting for us is the ability to fuse very low-level RAN data and fuse that together in a contextual manner with core data. Bringing all of this together in a seamless manner gives the network operators, both in every aspect of the business, all the way from finance all the way up through operations, gives them an end-to-end view of how to actually, what's happening in the network, what the costs are associated with that network, and where they actually make changes to the network in the future. That takes us into some of the network planning use cases. What is the network traffic mix? How are people using the network, and how does that impact policies, billing, etc.? It gives you lots of interesting decision points once you have that end-to-end view of subscriber behavior as well as application behavior on the network, and fusing those together gives you an interesting view. The quality of experience analysis, of course, making sure that the customer has the quality of experience that you expect. An interesting use case that we have that's been in the press a lot lately is tethering policies. So where we're seeing the transition from truly unlimited plans where people have tethered, they become abusive users towards the network, transitioning that to both detecting it in real time and implementing a policy to police it allows those unlimited plans to be brought into price performance metrics that finance expects. And being able to do that just by simply looking at network-oriented data in real time is key to doing that cost effectively, as well as impacting the network the way the operator wants. In M2M and IoT, we've seen the massive growth of machine-to-machine and IoT on networks, and it has some interesting impacts. So we're focused on looking again at that end-to-end, basically from the behavior of the sensor through the transport network, the platform that may be managing the transport network, such as a Jasper or a GDSP, and then up through the data center, being able to give the IoT customer the ability to actually view that entire network end-to-end is extremely important. And the contextual nature of this is quite interesting because an IoT network may be concerned about the health of batteries on Bluetooth sensors in addition to the health of mobile networks and their applications. So they have a different suite of views that they want to look at. And then, of course, that ties directly into the service provider that is providing enabling services for those IoT customers. So again, we're looking at spanning multiple domains in that end-to-end IoT domain. In the next-gen customer experience, care, big important issue. We've seen that in the previous portions of the presentations today. But understanding the quality of experience from in real time of that subscriber. This is actually quite an important thing because if you look at business intelligence of the past, it's been relatively easy for people to understand that a customer has had problems and therefore they become a churn candidate. But oftentimes that happens days or even weeks later than it has to than the time that the customer really wants feedback. So for example, if you actually know that the customer is having bad quality of experience and they are becoming a churn candidate, you can take action to mitigate that and do that in a time window which you can save the customer rather than just simply understand that the customer is leaving or has left the network in the future. So big difference between applying that near real time versus past views of the network. And then the anomaly detection, event correlation, so being able to fuse what actually in the network is causing the network to decay and what customers are impacted by that. Be able to fuse all of that together, visualize that to the customer care folks, and then being able to take actions on that. And then being able to apply both of these to proactive care-oriented views towards customer service, as well as to self-care, where the customer themselves may be able to make changes or view what they're experiencing and understand that and have a conversation with the service provider. On the marketing side of that, how does network data impact how we can interact or provide services to those customers? So service adoption and performance of the telco services versus over the top. How does the service provider actually want to compete?
Ben, I have to ask you to end there. I'd like to have time for a few questions. So now we're going to jump into a few questions. I see. I want to encourage our audience to, if you have questions about things that came up or about the topic in general, please submit questions, and we'll get to our panelists and put them to discussion. I did want to start off with one question that came in. That most operators have outsourced or have managed services and do not want to spend on data analytics. They want the vendors to spend on those tools. And where can we have a win-win situation? I think that that brings up the question of, the question of prepackaged big data analytics, outsourcing, and the investment in data science. And Scott Burns of CenturyLink, you touched on that quite a bit as well, and Chantal, I think that you did as well. So maybe we can talk a little bit about that whole question of outsourcing versus versus investing in data science, that question of prepackaged analytics that may have specific use cases, and versus maybe a more broad solution for a company. Is there anybody who'd like to jump on that topic? Scott, I don't know if maybe you want to start off touching on some of those things.
Sure, absolutely. So first things first, I think we talk a lot about the data domains within our world here, and within a domain, I think it's actually fairly easy to outsource the analytics component of your big data platform. So, for example, like in the marketing realm, if you're actually trying to deploy a DMP and understand behavioral data around specifically how are people interacting with all of your digital assets, that's actually a fairly easy thing to go outsource and then get it integrated back into your internal systems. The reality is for most telcos is you've got a decade or two of a back office mess where no one's ever wanted to invest the billions to actually create a conformed back office that really matches the way and the needs of the business today. So what you have is a patchwork of various systems that you have to try to get to, try to figure out how to put all those pieces together so that it makes sense to the organization as you go through more bundling strategies from a product standpoint and you get more aligned to customer experience. So I actually feel it's very difficult to outsource without spending an astronomical amount of money of building middleware layers for a lot of your network components. That's just my personal opinion based off of a company that's gone through the past probably 2 decades of lots of M&A activity, which really leaves kind of a back office mess. So I really feel like in certain areas, so if you're talking about NPS, very easy to outsource. If you're talking about marketing data that's associated to digital kind of next-gen assets, very easy. If you're talking about just usage data off a given network or usage data where you have a single billing system, you absolutely can outsource that data. But if you build a compiled system, it's okay to bring in resources to actually build the data science around it and a lot of the predictive modeling. But I definitely think that your information management infrastructure has to be internally managed, and then you bring in resources to augment that based off of specialty on top.
Okay. Chantal, do you have thoughts on that aspect?
Yeah, just to kind of elaborate a bit more, I think that what we'll see as far as trends, we'll see kind of a combination of prepackaged analytic solutions, and then we may even start to see telcos begin to purchase data science as a service. So we'll have a vendor come in, provide some kind of consulting services, understand what the challenges are for the telcos, what the objectives are long term, and then from there kind of outsource the data and have outsourced data scientists kind of work on extracting analytics and apply it across the business. And kind of the benefit there is that one, it's very, I believe as CenturyLink mentioned, it's very difficult to find the talent out there, and then once you find it, it's very difficult to keep it. So the benefits of having data science as a service is that you kind of get best practices. You don't have to really worry about retaining talent, and then on top of that, you get kind of industry best practices as well. So I guess you can kind of debate it on both sides of the coin. I think for telcos who are maybe debating whether or not hiring data scientists in-house, if that's worth the investment, then maybe starting off with data science as a service in order to prove return on investment is a good starting point. And then certainly kind of long-term, as I mentioned earlier, the applications of big data in the business are limitless. So as we have more data and start to do more things with data, having data science as a service will certainly allow telcos to kind of get a different perspective and outside perspective of their data that they wouldn't normally get in-house.
Okay. Another question from our audience mentioned that in Ovum's survey that network monitoring and optimization was listed as number 2 in order of priority, which is understandable considering the role of the network, that the network plays for telecom operators. We did quite a bit of time talking about marketing analytics today. So the question was, so are vendors looking at network equipment, but are the operators looking at network equipment vendors to provide the monitoring and optimization analytics, and has anyone deployed this today? And I'm wondering if we could have Ansi and Scott of Exedian address that question. Ansi, maybe we can start with you.
Yes, certainly. So we're actually focusing not at all at marketing side. We're focusing entirely on quality of experience and network monitoring and optimization. we see that also as a growing business. There's a lot of, first of all, there's a lot of attention in that area. I don't think the operators are that interested in using network equipment vendors to provide that functionality, simply because they are a bit biased, especially when it comes in analyzing the customer experience. So obviously they are incentivized to show a little bit better figures than perhaps an independent party would be. So that's why this is normally a job for an independent vendor to basically to collect the data from various different network element vendors components, and then combine it together to come up with this comprehensive view, or kind of a view that how are the services performing and how is the network performing and how it could be optimized.
Okay, Scott?
Yeah, that's a very good point. And the thing is that most vendors out there are really just a part of the entire network. So when you look at some typical operators, we worked with SK Telecom on this particular type of application. Just taking them as an example, they have 5 different vendors in their network, including Cisco and Juniper, and 3 different base station vendors. So the idea here is not to rely on an individual vendor. You do need a unified solution. You need some sort of United Nations of instrumentation that can bring these things all together. But what the operator probably should be thinking about, and that's something that SK Telecom planned in advance, is to make sure that there's support for standards-based performance monitoring metrics and protocols in all of the different vendors' equipment, so that you can use the installed base of the network itself as part of the instrumentation. So you can use them to collect uniform metrics across all of these different vendors' equipment, even if they are working in different technologies and different parts of the network.
Great. Well, we're coming to the end of our time here. I'd like to ask each of our panelists if we could talk about, either practical lessons learned or tips to keep in mind for operators who are looking to leverage big data and really get more value out of the data that they have. And I'd like to start with Exedian there. And Scott, what are some of the things that you've seen that have worked and that are really driving networks forward?
Yeah, I think we're all starting to realize as networks get more complex, whether we're talking about hybrid cloud connectivity or we're talking about the movement to the Internet of Things or 5G networks and mobile, that networks are becoming far more dense, complex, and dynamic. So it's getting to the point where in a couple of years it'll be very hard for operators to optimally use their network assets in a manual way by simply looking at what's trending in the network and figuring out what to do with that data. It's going to have to come down to an analytics platform and some sort of automated learning or self-organization to actually optimize all the different services in the network over all the different components of the network in real time, so that ultimately operators can utilize their network much better, so they can use the assets to a more full extent, but also have the ability to maintain the particular performance requirements of each individual application. So if you're looking at things like VoLTE competing with 4K video streaming, just to make sure that everything has its own place in the network and the expectations and user experience of each customer are met according to the plan that they've subscribed to. So I think that's the trend we're seeing coming up, is really the introduction of analytics into the real-time control path and using that data over time to learn how to better run the network automatically.
Okay. Anzi, thoughts on lessons learned or practical applications that you've seen really work?
Well, yes, I think we have seen a great deal of interest in big data and analytics, and especially on real time. Since we are working directly with the real-time functions like network operations or service operations that were also brought up earlier. So our learning is that the key point in starting in any analytics project is really spend enough time on defining the use cases. That what exactly is the target, what we're trying to achieve. Well, typically for us, it's in the area of service experience. But what particular service are we talking about, and how do we actually achieve that visibility? Because at the end of the day, there are thousands, probably hundreds or even thousands of different platforms or solutions out there, and some of them are more generic and some of them are more specialized to a certain task. So like Scott mentioned earlier, analyzing the quality, for example, for voice over LTE is extremely complex task. You need to be able to tap into to different parts of the network in real time. You have to be able to digest billions of transactions in real time. And then all of those have to be correlated in order to form a picture that how, for example, voice over LTE is performing. So at the end of the day, that cannot be achieved with the generic big data implementation. That requires a lot of domain knowledge and understanding on how actually voice over LTE works. So no, our actually key learning is that enough time should be spent actually on defining the use cases. What is it that is the end target, and what's the best way to implement on that?
Okay. Chantal, thoughts, things that you've seen? You mentioned a few in your presentation. I don't know if you had any additional thoughts on recommendations.
I think the key recommendations here are for telcos to map the customer journey and the customer lifestyle. So it doesn't matter what's happening on the back end. If the customer can't see it, it doesn't matter. So all of the applications of big data analytics need to have customer-facing results in order for telcos to see immediate results in their return on investment.
Okay. And Scott and Maria from CenturyLink, do you have thoughts? Both of you touched on a lot of lessons learned at CenturyLink. Is there anything you haven't had a chance to mention yet?
I'll just jump in with two things. Keep it short and simple. One, I think Chantal said it best, focus on the customer. Everything's got to be customer-oriented. That's your bread and butter, and that's where your revenue comes from. And then second, if you're building analytics that don't carry action behind them, then they're worthless.
Okay. And Ben, do you have any final thoughts? We need to wrap up here. What's thoughts on?
Absolutely. So, in multi-vendor networks, creating that single source of truth by collecting data out of all of the network elements, and then focusing like a laser on use cases that have a return on investment. That funds the initial part and then takes you on to the next set of use cases.
Okay, great. We'd like to thank our audience for participating and sticking with us today, and thank you for your questions and your time. Again, you can download the special report from rcrwireless.com, and thank you to all of our panelists today. Thank you.